Hey everyone, Matt with Ozark Overland Adventures here, and in this video I want to talk about, pretty quickly, how to have a very smooth and very comfortable riding Jeep. And I say quickly because we are obviously back home. We are back home from our trip from the Pacific Northwest, where we explored Idaho, some areas of Oregon, and the Sierra Nevadas, some of the Cascades, and ultimately ran through Rubicon Trail in Sully. That trip was the very first real long distance and off-road trip that I have done with Sully since we put the new Clayton front long arm kit on there. And from that experience, I have learned a lot about what makes up a very smooth and comfortable riding Jeep. But being back home in Arkansas, it is ridiculously hot. So if you see this shirt, looks like I spent time under a waterfall by the end of this video, that's why. It feels like Satan has picked up Arkansas, shoved it in his armpit where it's hot and moist, and it is just really, really gross to be back home, honestly. So, but gotta do what we gotta do. So over the years, we have owned a total of 7 Wranglers / Gladiators. We have had cheap budget suspensions on our Jeeps. We have had higher end suspensions on our Jeeps. We've never had like really high end stuff like coilovers and triangulated 4 links and that sort of fancy stuff. We've just had, the normal lift kits until I just got the long arms on Sully. So I want to talk about 5 key areas that will help you get the smoothest and most comfortable ride out of your Jeep. Because it is definitely a myth that because it's a Jeep, because it has a solid front axle, that it just rides rough. It doesn't have to. People who say that it's a Jeep thing, they've never had a good suspension. They've never had everything dialed in properly, if that's the mindset. Now, the first thing I want to talk about are your tires. Tire selection. There's really 2 things about your tires that you need to know. First is the air pressure. A lot of people run too much air pressure in their tires. That is going to make for a rougher ride. So many times I will either get new tires or go have them rotated if I don't have time to do it myself. And I'll see 40, 42, 43 PSI in my tires. If you pick up a Jeep from the dealer, chances are it's gonna have over 40 PSI in the tires. So tire pressure makes a huge difference on ride quality. That should make sense. These are the first contact with the ground. And if these are hard as a rock, well, your ride's gonna be hard as a rock. So I'm not gonna tell you what air pressure to run because that's gonna vary depending on the tire that you're running. Some tires need more, some tires need less. So the tires that we run, the Milestar on Sully, the Patagonia MT02s on Kara's Jeeps, the Patagonia XTs, they're a crown tire, which means they are specifically designed to run here in the center section of the tire. And so for that, we do run higher PSI in our tires than I think anybody with a typical mud tire or an all-terrain would. There's a tool, you can do a chalk test where you just lay down some chalk on the ground, roll your tires through it, or drive your tires through it because you want the weight of the vehicle on it, and see how much of your tire width is making contact with the ground. From that, you can adjust your PSI up or down accordingly to get the best performing ride out of your tire. If you go too low, if you go too high, you're going to have issues with faster tread wear or cupping or uneven tread wear, that sort of thing. So you want to get it right, but your tire PSI definitely makes a difference. The second thing is the load rating of your tire. I see a lot of people, in lighter weight Wranglers and stuff like that, and they're running really heavy load range E tires. A load range E tire is a super stiff sidewall because it's designed to carry very heavy loads. And if you're running a load range E tire in a vehicle that doesn't weigh enough to justify that load, then you're gonna have a stiffer ride. It's just how it works. I think for Kara's Wrangler, we're running load range C. For both of our Gladiators, we're running load range Ds. And it makes a difference in your ride quality to run the proper load range tire on your vehicle. The biggest mistake I see is people running load range E. So they think because it's an E, it's got the stiffer sidewall, it's going to be tougher on the rocks and those sort of things. And there may be some truth to that, but it is going to end up with you having a tougher ride. All right, let's talk about number 3. Moving into the suspension side of thing, your coils or your springs. Not all coils are created equal. Some are stiffer than others, and some are going to give you a stiffer ride than others. The only way to know that is to check the spring rates on them. A lower spring rate is going to be a softer, more cushy ride. A higher spring rate is going to be a stiffer ride. And those are really dependent upon, like your sidewall rating, about the weight of your Jeep. So if you are running a coil designed for a heavier Jeep on a lightweight Jeep, that's going to be a very stiff ride. You're going to feel every imperfection in the road. You're going to feel every pothole, every washboard. It's just going to be a very rough, jarring ride. Now, the flip side of that is if you're running a spring that is rated for a lighter vehicle than what yours actually is, it's going to be very bouncy as you're going down the road. Your shocks are really going to be working to mitigate that bounce and to keep everything in check. And if you have people prone to, motion sickness and getting car sick, that could be a reason why when they're in your Jeep, they're not feeling so good. If your springs are just super bouncy, that's not good either. So make sure your springs are actually rated for the weight of your vehicle. Now, in Gladiator land, it is very easy if you're building out an Overland rig to overweight the back end with the spring rates, and that's why so many companies, Clayton, Metal Cloak, I think Rockcrawler makes some now, I think Evo makes some now, Dobinson makes some, make HD springs or heavy duty springs that are rated for a heavier spring rate. I've got Clayton's HD coils in the back of this, and it makes a big difference between when I had the standard coils and after I added all the weight. It really changes the ride quality to have the proper rated springs for your vehicle. Number 4, man, it is, I'm really starting to sweat here, so I'm trying to move on. Number 4 is your shocks. Not all shocks are created equal. They're all valved for different weights. I think for the most part, if you buy a kit that the company designs their own shocks, like we have the Metal Club Game Changer on Kara's Gladiator with the Rocksport Reds. It's Metal Club's pretty basic shock. That is a good spring rate shock valving combo. They're designed to work together. It's when you get into pairing different shocks with your kits. Or like the Clayton doesn't make shocks, so they have their recommendations on the shocks that they recommend for their kits. It's when you deviate from those that you can start to have issues. I tested. When I first got my Gladiator, I had the Bilstein 5100s. Great basic shock, stiffer shock, but it controls the body roll very well. I switched those to the Fox 2.0 shocks. I got a whole video on it. Hated those shocks because they weren't firm enough. The body roll, going around corners, just hitting whoops and stuff, and you just keep bouncing, made for a very uncomfortable ride. It wasn't good at all. So it's important to get your shock and spring combo right. Now, I have absolutely fallen in love with these Bilstein 8100 DSAs. The ability to dial in your ride for your preferences, the type of terrain that you're on, if you're going slow over rocks, if you're going fast in the desert, has been absolutely incredible as far as ride quality goes. These shocks themselves, and they're not cheap, I'm not gonna lie to you, they're not cheap shocks. But if you're looking for the absolute best ride quality, a set of adjustable shocks where you can dial in both the hard and soft compression. So you can dial in the comfort level or your preference for those hard hits, like think going over washboards or hitting a pothole, and dial in the soft compression, which is your body roll, and going slowly over things. Being able to dial those in makes a huge difference in your ride quality and your comfort level. So I am absolutely in love with these Bilstein 8100s and highly recommend them. All right, last but not least, number 5 are the control arms. The control arms have made a huge difference in my rod quality. Like I said, up until I got these Clayton long arms, I've never had long arms before. I always thought they were more for rock crawling and more articulation and that sort of thing, and didn't realize the benefit that they had on just overall ride quality. And so I got my handy dandy little piece of paper here, cardboard, and we're gonna have drawing time because this is basically math. So what happens is a factory. So here's your frame, and here's your tire. The control arms are what connect your axle to the frame. And if you ever look at a stock Jeep, the control arms are actually pretty flat. And that's ultimately what you want, is you want a flat control arm. Because as you're going down the road, you want the tire to be able to move up and down, or the axle to be able to move up and down very efficiently. And so if it's flat and it hits a bump, it's just it's going straight up. The more you lift your vehicle, so let's say we lift this 3 inches, well, now the angle of the control arm is more angled down. So let's say you hit, so now you were here, now you're here, now you hit the same bump. Yes, it's still obviously able to pivot up, but some of that force gets transferred back into the frame, which creates a rougher, more jarring ride. Now, you got 2 ways to fix this. You can do what some people do, and mine's the only one that's been fixed. Kara's Gladiator, you can tell the difference between the ride quality between our 2 Gladiators, because hers are have the standard control arm points, and her control arms look like this. Hers are actually, I measured it, hers are 12 degrees is her angle of her control arms. My control arms are only 5 degrees with the long arms. So you got, with the long arm, you delete your factory control arm out and you move it back further in the frame. So now instead of here, you're here. And so you have a flatter control arm compared to a 3-inch lift at the factory location. And the ride quality is amazing, absolutely amazing. It does make a difference. The other thing you can do is what's called a drop bracket. And so you take your factory location here and you put a bracket in that effectively lowers it and moves it back down there. So it look more like bracket, tire, and then you're like this. So that is another option. I think we will probably try that option on Kara's Gladiator. I'm not a big fan of drop brackets because obviously you come, if you're rock crawling and you come off a rock, boom, that's hanging down to grab rocks. I don't like that. I know plenty of people that use them, but I don't know if they like to rock crawl as much as, especially my wife does. So, but I think for comparison, we may get a set of drop brackets and put them on hers and be able to compare. But ultimately, I think we'll do long arms on hers. And do not underestimate the significance that the angle of your control arms have on your ride quality. So if you're running a 3.5-inch lift and you still got that factory location, I mean, you might consider going with a long arm kit on the front or going with a drop bracket to bring that down. My wife's Wrangler has just a 2.5-inch lift. Her control arms are also at 5 degrees, like my Gladiator. So, if you're just 2.5 inches of lift, I wouldn't mess with the control arm locations because it's not going to impact it that much. If you're at 3.5 inches of lift
Or, you know, I know people who are running 6-inch lifts, still running that factory control arm. I mean, their control arms are like this. I can't imagine how horrible that rides. But control arms make a huge difference. All right, well, there you go. 5 things that contribute to your ride comfort and your ride quality. Your tires, sidewall and PSI, your shocks, your springs, and your control arm geometry. All of those make a huge difference. I say this all the time, never cheap out on your suspension. Always go with a quality suspension that lets you dial in your geometry. Companies that even have long arm options, choose a good quality shock, and the whole rough riding, it's a Jeep thing, that's not going to be a thing for you. That's not a thing. So if your Jeep rides poorly, it's because of poor choices. And people who just say it's a Jeep thing, they've also made poor choices, and they don't know how good it can be. It can be really, really good. A Jeep will never ride as good as an IFS vehicle. It's just not going to happen because of the solid axles, but it can ride very good. So hope this was helpful. If you want to give the video a like, please, assuming you did, subscribe to the channel if you're not, and check to see if you are subscribed. So many people are saying, I don't see your videos anymore. They're not coming up in my feed. Well, make sure you're subscribed. Hit the bell notification so that you get notified when new content is uploaded. If you like what we're doing and you want to consider supporting the channel, check out the Patreon link in the description or right here on the QR code. And for all of our merchandise, minus the sweat, go shop overland.com. You can get your own t-shirt and put your own sweat in it. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye.